Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddy Network podcast. My guest today has returned from being a guest 2 years ago, and it's Fateme Banishoeib. And she's a remarkable person, and I'm a big fan of hers. And it's because she has combined things in her life which just are remarkable. And we're gonna talk about this. I met her first because she was a poet and an artist. And then I found out that she had done other things. And I think what she wants to tell us is they're all kind of the same, have the same impulse. So, welcome,
Mm.
Fatime. Thank you for coming back here. And it's great to see you. And I thank you for all the creative work that you have given to us in the world.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for having me on a second round. I hope we can, open up and explore somewhere else or new foreign territories we didn't during our first recording a couple of years ago.
Yeah. So, what I'd like us to talk about is poetry.
Mm,
Uh,
mm,
I have just announced the formation of a YouTube playlist of those from my guests, who are guests on the podcast who are poets, and it's called
mm,
the Eddy Network Poets. And I'm really doing this because I want, for one, it's a recognition that I am becoming more interested in poetry, and I want
mm,
to act in a way that actually puts my intentions into the public sphere. I want to say to people, poetry is important to me, where it hadn't been in the past, but now it is. Okay, so I'm
mm.
saying that, but I also want to feature the people who have been on the podcast who I think are has something to say through poetry. So,
Mm.
what do you think of that?
I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that, I wouldn't even call it a passion. It's really a need and a desire for poetry. And it's not about, calling myself a poet or calling myself whatever name, but it's really, this deep longing to poetry, of poetry or being immersed in poetry. And to me, poetry as art in a broader sense are everywhere. And as such, because they are everywhere, we are also all poets and artists. I often, start my workshops or my talks claiming that or making this statement that there is a poet, there is an artist within each and every one of us. And at times people look at me like a little bit puzzled or a little bit like confused. It's like, no, I never written poetry, or I don't even read poetry, or I'm not close to poetry. But I think the contrary. In Italy, I'm Italian. In Italy, we have a say. Often, when we see something remarkably beautiful or for which we don't have really words to express, for example, a sunset or even some food, or something that really touches us, we would say, I'll say it first in Italian, che poesia è una poesia, meaning this is poetry. And so there is that quality of beauty, there is that quality of something that touches us so profoundly, in a way that is so deep that we can't express in other words than saying it's it's poetry. And because we all have those moments, we all have encountered those moments. Because of that, that seed of poetry, I think, is within each and every one of us. So the way I see my work or my vocation, I should say, is really trying to evoke that poet, that artist within each and every one out. I really want to see people, like you just said, so this made me very, very happy. Say, oh, I'm my awareness is opening up to poetry, to the point that we start first reading poetry, and then we get to know poets a little better, to the point that then we have this desire of wanting to write poetry, or wanting to make poetry, wanting to create poetry. And that's my secret and deepest desire, that we all arrive to that point.
I totally agree with you, and I will say that I want to write poetry. I will try that, and actually I've begun a little bit, but it's not ready to be shared with the public. A month or 6 weeks ago, I went to an event where there were poets and essayists, and
Mhm,
there were five poets and five essayists and one rap singer,
mhm,
and they all presented something, and it was really remarkable. It was a remarkable event, and so I began talking to some of the people there. I said, "Well, I'd like to have you on my podcast." And one of the poets was a fellow named Kevin Latour, who has now been on the podcast. And it was in talking with him that kind of um, turned that switch that said, "Okay, this is something I need to pursue. This some and that's where the idea of the playlist came from.
mhm,
Um, what I like about your book, The Whisper, which is a collection of poems, and I'd like you to say a little bit about what kind of brought you to this book.
mhm.
And if you'll let me in a little bit, I may read one of your poems.
Sure. I love when people read poetry to me because usually it's me reading poems to others. So I love when it's flipped. I love it.
Okay, well, we'll do that in a minute. But what led you to write this? Well, you didn't write a book; you wrote a collection of poetry. So that's a difference. There's a difference there, isn't it?
There is a difference. I would say that those poems were already within me. And suddenly, it's like opening a vase, and then you discover something. And I always say that in a moment in which my um, heart was broken, poetry came out of it. And people who know me since I was a child say that even as a child, I was writing poetry. I was writing poems. And I forgot for a big chunk of my life that was within me as I pursue, my studies and my career, as I let the world outside of me convince me that I couldn't be a poet or that poetry and art in general were frivolous activities. So I forgot. And then suddenly, these poems came out of me without me doing anything intentionally. I didn't sit down and say, let me write poems or let me write a book, let me collect poems. No, they just came out. And if you have seen, it is on my website. If you have seen, there is a little docu-story telling how this came out. So I went to, in a very difficult moment of my life, I went to a writing retreat, not because I wanted to write something, but because I was so desperate that the first thing that appeared on my radar, I decided to book myself in. But I went there not with any interest in writing anything, but probably because I was surrounded by people who were writing, or because it was the right moment. I don't know. I remember, the first night starting the retreat facilitator asked us, write on a piece of paper something nobody knows about you. And without even thinking, I wrote, uh, and I did not know at that time that I was supposed to read it out loud. Otherwise, I would have probably, edited myself. I wrote, I run a manufacturing plant and I hate it. And that became an unstoppable flow of poems. I actually wrote The Whisper, or as I like to say, The Whisper wrote itself through my hands on the flight back from that retreat. And then I sat on it for a couple of years because I did not know what had happened to me. I was in another world. I was focused on other things. I had my job, but then, you know, it was enough. It was big enough. It was deep enough that I didn't forget what happened. I just didn't pay too much attention. And then when I sat down and I decided to type them down, I realized there was a conversation that I was having within all the facets that made me without me even realizing it. So by me typing that down, by me sitting and almost like, listening to myself talking in poetry, I had to take some decision. I had to reevaluate, reassess, and collect pieces of me which were scattered all over. And try. And since then, I've tried to bring all those pieces that make me, and not only me. This is not unique to me. It's we are all made by different facets. We are all composed by multitudes and many many artists have said this, have experienced this, and have, wrote or created because of the multitudes, because of the facets they are composed by. So it's nothing unique to me as a person, but is unique to us as human beings. So once I realized that, I had to start, collecting these pieces, and poetry has been the the vehicle, the container, the vessel, the guide, the star that has helped me have a conversation and create a me that is all or more all than the one that was just a piece of here and a piece there and a piece there. And so that has, set me on a very different path. However, I always say that it's always me. It's just the me that is more, aware or is conscious about the conversation I'm having with myself, and as a result, the conversation I'm having with the world. And they happen to be poetic, lyrical, but it's always me. I don't see a separation. I don't see a me before or a me after.
I, well, and that's why I'm so curious as how it is that you found yourself going through that long process of earning a PhD in chemistry. In what in chemistry?
Yes, chemistry.
So I would think people who typically are going to get a PhD in chemistry are not also at the same time thinking about being poets. To me seems that that's really far apart. So what
Mhm.
was it as a young woman in school that led you into chemistry? What was there something poetic about chemistry that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I mean, I really don't see any difference. I have exactly the same feeling running through me
Uh-huh.
when I write a poem or when I was a young scientist in the lab making, chemical reaction. It is an alchemy. It is the alchemy of bringing elements together and create and bringing into being something that didn't exist before. I mean, even if we look at the word, and you might know this, the word poetry coming from Greek poiesis, which means creating, making anew, bringing into life. Isn't that something that happens in a chemical reaction? Is exactly the same. And you know what? And I'm not talking about, the mechanical aspect of mixing words or mixing molecules. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about the quality of openness, the quality of curiosity, the quality of paying attention that is required, and that desire of make, making alchemy that that is at the foundation of what I do. So that's why I say I didn't change, because the quality of my being, yes, of course, expanded. I matured throughout the years. I'm not still the same person I was when I was 20 or even 30, but because it's a process of evolution. But the quality of my essence, the quality of my being is the same.
So when you mix chemicals together and you want to create a new compound, there's something, one of those chemicals will have a catalytic effect on the others. So, what is it that is the catalytic effect that creates the poetry, and
Mm.
also I should suggest the art, which is behind you and to your either side of you. The artistic side of you is there's a catalyst within you that is bringing this combination of
Mm.
things that are you to life. And do you know what that is? Do you know what the catalyst?
Yes. Yes, I mean, I came to this conclusion, and this is it could be different for others. When I decided to um, leave behind my corporate job and embark on this journey that brought poetry in, art in, leadership in, all sorts of things. And by the way, I still call myself a scientist because I didn't forget to be a scientist. I'm still the same person. I mean, it was also that science is also vocation, not only poetry. So they both were vocation, and it's just that prior, I believed that I had to choose one and they were in conflict and I couldn't combine them. Now I'm firmly convinced that there is a possibility to bring all of who we are together. But anyway, so people start asking me, like, yeah, but what you just asked me, but what poetry and chemistry have in common? I mean, it's like, what do they have in common? And it came out of my mouth almost as an instinct, almost an intuition. And the more I think about it, the more I find this being true for me. And what that catalyst, so that what the thing that they have in common for me is truth, this desire of seeking truth,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is essential to me, which is part of who I am, which is why I do the things I do, which is the why I am who I am. This desire of this seeking, constant seeking of truth with capital letters, not. And I think that's the catalyst. That's the catalyst both in poetry as in chemistry as in leadership, or at least it is for me.
I agree with you. Totally agree with
Mm.
you. And the fact that you said that just um, stirs within me a sense that if we were to seek to discover truth, um, not truth as in the opposite of false, something false, but
Mhm.
truth as
Mhm.
something which is life,
Mhm.
that we will see things about ourselves and see things about the world that we could not see in any other way.
Mhm. It's almost, taking a veil, taking a cap off. So opening our attention, opening our presence to something that is live, to something that is there, to something that is present. And as a result, we get changed because to be able to do that, we constantly have to practice, presence, curiosity, exploration, all qualities that make us human, that make us a good artist, that make us a good leader. Those
Yeah.
are essential qualities to us that they're not skills that we don't have to train them as a tool to go from point A to point B, but they are practices that open us up to life, that open us up to the truth,
And to open us up to change.
to change, to evolve. I like to say it evolution. I really, because that's what happens. We evolve, life evolves, and that's what we have in common with
Yes.
life is evolution, not growth or whatever we like to say, because then we sound smart and clever. The only purpose of life is evolution, and we have the exact same purpose: evolve.
Well, I think that's what happened in my conversation with Kevin.
Mm,
I
mm,
had been working, but prior to this, but prior to my conversation with, I had been working on the follow-up to my book, Circle of Impact.
Hmm.
And that's, I finished that manuscript 7 years ago. So it's been a
Hmm.
long time. And I felt that it's time for the follow-up.
Hmm.
And I started writing it more or less in January. And then at the end of February, I felt I didn't like what I was seeing.
Mm.
I felt like I was just repeating myself.
Mm.
And so I made the decision to abandon it.
Oh,
I abandoned the book altogether and I decided I'm going to stop writing.
for good?
Time. I'm going to take a sabbatical,
Mm. I know what you mean. Hmm.
intentional writing for publication.
Hmm.
I also decided to take an intentional sabbatical from being involved in social media.
Hmm.
And then, boom, all of a sudden I'm having this conversation with Kevin, and poetry emerges as this replacement, as this thing that filled the gap.
Hmm.
Now, is it what does that really mean long term? I don't know what that means long term, but it opened up a place of peace
Hmm.
and creativity that was missing.
Hmm.
Um, and so I haven't been reading a lot of poetry, but I've started rereading literature that I'd read 40,
Hmm.
50 years ago.
Hmm.
So my whole internal life has changed in a matter of a few weeks.
It does. I think that's the power of when we um, free ourselves from an outcome, an achievement, or a goal-oriented action, then creativity opens up. I actually think that's what happened. And because we are not so obsessed in chasing a result, so we almost like give ourselves permission to explore, engage, play, create, regardless of the outcome. That's always like to ask people, that like you are writing a book or are driven by creating something because of an achievement. And I'm not saying that that's not important. I'm not saying dismiss it. I'm just saying, okay, become curious. It's like, okay, what? But would you make that? Would you write that regardless of publishing a book, regardless if it gets, a lot of likes on a social media? So it's almost like what I'm trying to say is like enjoy the process because in there lies gold. And that might lead to a book, that might lead to several books, that might lead to whatever. Um, but it's almost like being with the process.
There's an old saying that goes, "Physician, heal thyself." And
Yes.
and when people have come up to me at events or someplace and they said, "Oh, I'd love to write a book," and I say, "Don't write a book, just write. And the
Mhm.
book will appear." Well, I didn't do that. I was intentionally writing a book, and so I had to really listen to my own recommendation is. So
Yeah.
it
Take your own medicine.
there'll be a book that will come out of this. I know that. I know
I'm
that.
sure.
Yeah. Because I'm
I'm
I
sure.
I like that. I like the process. So let me
Mm.
let me read a poem. Um, and I thought I'd read two. I want to read two of them, and
Okay.
and they follow one another.
Okay.
Embrace the burnout.
Mm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. This is from The Whisperer. I write to hear the whisper. I am burnt out. I write to witness the conflicts and obsessions. I write to silence them. I write to walk the path. The guide is the whisper. I wake up tired every day, black circles around my eyes. again. A hammer in my head, 3 hours of sleep at night, a night. I decide that I too can be transformed, not by makeup to cover black circles, but by poetry, by a new vocabulary. We need substitutes, denial, excuse me, where need substitutes, denial, pardon me. On the white pages, I put light and shadow, silence and noise, moon and sun. I want to see them dancing. I want to see them coupling, not separating. I want to see questions and answers in the endless dance of my mind. If they can dance day and night in my mind, why can't they on stage? With generosity, I give them the stage, this page, and take the harmony of the silence in my mind. In this silence, I hear the vibration of the whisper singing, embrace the burnout. That's good. That's really good. Okay. Now, this is the whisperer's meditation. This is almost like the response, the whisperer's
Mm.
response to your burnout. Am I right about that?
You won't believe this, but the order of the poems as they are published is the order in which I've written them,
Oh, yeah. Well, that makes,
beginning to end.
okay. This is the whisperer's meditation. There is no right, no wrong, no good, no bad, no truth, no lie. Don't lie. Don't hide. Make peace with the loneliness of your home. Make love with the darkness in your lonely bedroom. Make friends with the burnout, using the pen as a need to survive it. Spread the wings and live. The cage is open. In this cage, I meditate in craving out suffering. I need help. I need compassion. I need relief. I send these needs out and take in more. How is that happening? If you want something, give it. This must change. Take in suffering, send out happiness. Which happiness? The one I want? Yes, that same one.
Oof.
Great.
It makes me emotional. I have to hold tears back.
Yeah, I cry too. It's if I may comment, and say this is what I like about how you wrote that. There was such truth to there. The truth is there, but there's an economy of words where you're not overstating it, and that's really a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Thank you. That's how they that's how they came. You have noticed that there is no punctuation in a book. There is. That's how the line broke. That's the word that came, and there has been very minimal editing into the publishing of the book. That's how they came, and I was at first shocked by when I typed down and I read it, I was shocked. I for a moment I said, no, it's not possible that I wrote this. From where this came from. And and then I realized that, yes, those are conversations happening in my mind constantly, in my body, in my cells constantly. And so that's why I said I was broken, I was burned out, my heart was broken, a series of things. And because of that, that poetry finally was freed, was released, and came out of of me in that way. And those words, hearing you reading it, those words still resonate with me. I still feel them on my skin.
Mhm.
Uh, And that is I don't even have a word for it. That is like I've written that in, so the actual writing happened in 2014, and then the book was published in 2017. So this is 10 years later.
Yeah.
10 years later, and I know exactly the feeling of writing that. I know exactly.
So as I read those words,
Mhm.
did you hear your voice?
I heard my voice, my sentiments, my feelings, and I also heard something else. And but I don't say this with arrogance or, grandiose intention,
Oh.
but I also hear the pain or, those emotions that are common to many others. And what the publishing the book taught me. So writing the book taught me something, and publishing the book taught me something else. Especially when I start speaking the book, I always said that I had to become the person who could speak the book.
Mhm.
So I had to catch up. I had to catch up. I had to evolve to become the person who could be able to speak those words. And as I start sharing those words after the publication of the book, I suddenly realized that I was not alone in feeling those emotions. They were common to a lot of people. And of course, each one of us has their own story. Each one of us has, if we were to read the same poems in a room with a number of people, we all would have or would relate, or maybe even not, because we have a different story. And so we actually infuse then the poem with our own story, and that's when the poem becomes larger. And so publishing the book taught me something I did not know before, that I was not alone in that. I was not alone in experiencing that. And I think that's the power of art. That's the power of poetry. That
And it's the
we,
power of your voice, simply giving voice to what's
Mhm,
inside of you. And I don't think people recognize how important that is
mhm,
because there are a lot of people who, I mean, I'm on Zoom calls all the time. People don't say anything, they're just listening and they don't feel like they have something to say. And yet if they just said something so where they could hear their own voice in the
mhm.
context of a group of people, I think it could be transformational.
It can be. It can be, and certainly is. And we suddenly realize that we have a lot to share with one another. We are more similar than diverse. I mean, the raw material that is underneath our suits has a lot of things in common with a lot of people. And that's the power of art. That's the power of poetry, taking that out, expressing, first of all, exploring that. So becoming familiar. In the poem I wrote, I need a new language. And that new language was the language of poetry, to express and navigate and explore, even immerse myself in my own feelings. So I needed a vocabulary to apprehend that and comprehend what I was going through. And that is the language and the vocabulary of art. Either that be a painting or either that be a poem. And in my case, it happened to be poetry. And I strongly believe that poetry, in comparison to prose, has infinite power in helping us explore the rawness, the messy feelings that are within us. And once we, kind of become accustomed, almost like we are start taste, as if we are tasting something. We taste that new vocabulary. We taste the fact that there are nuances to emotion, there are nuances to feelings. Then we start, opening up to others' feeling, others' emotion. And then we understand, oh, what I initially label as fill in the blank is more nuanced than that. So until we don't do that, it's very difficult to communicate with one another. Very difficult because we don't have a vocabulary to express what's going on inside in our inner worlds. We really don't have. That's why we fight. That's why we judge. That's why things get tense. And I'm not saying that if you develop a poetic literacy, there won't be conflict. But I think that the way we will approach to that tension is going to be dramatically different.
Um, when you began, I'm coming back to this interplay of the artistic and the scientific, and the interplay of the personal with the manager.
Mm.
Were you able to share some of this with people at the plant?
Ah, yes, but people people who have not known me see a drastic change. I, from the inside, don't see this change. And people who have been close enough to me know that somehow I've been always poetic in, in my way to express it. I mean, there have been people who came to me and said, oh, well, that doesn't surprise me that you are passionate about poetry and now you want to write poems, because sometimes even when you take notes in the meetings, they rhyme. they are they are poetic, or
Oh, that's
so
beautiful.
that wouldn't, you wouldn't call that strictly poetry, but let me put it, there was a certain elegance in the coldness of, and a certain harmony more than an elegance, an aesthetic into the coldness of meeting minutes. Also, for example, I remember even before uh, become public with this uh, new dress, all my meetings with my staff would start with something artistic or inspirational. That was the moment in which I would bring my staff together. That was the moment in which I would uh, call in the presence of everyone. And so I always say, even now when I coach or I mentor people in in leadership position, managers in companies, say, well, you can make a very conscious decision and you don't need to ask permission for anything to how you set the tone with every single conversation you're having, that be a one-on-one meeting, a staff meeting, or something. How do you start that? How do you bring, because we all know, I mean, we all have been there. People are running from one meeting to another. It seems that the job is meet other people. It's like doing the real job, and people are late and running. They have not had the time even to breathe or to know where they are, which topic they're shifting on. How do you bring the people in? How do you call their presence? How, or as I like to say, how do you evoke that leader in each and every one? How do you evoke that poet? How do you evoke that artist within each and every one? And then once we are all in that new landscape, we can talk about hard stuff, difficult stuff, tensions, conflict, but we are going to approach to that with a different presence, very different presence. And there is an exercise I always do. This is, after I left corporate, but even before leaving corporate, there was an element of art in whatever I was doing. And it's part of who I am. So it's like I always carry the poet with me, regardless of what I'm doing, regardless of the task. But I always say to especially people who are dealing with, conflict or tension within a team, even a family or with friends, okay, write a poem about that conflict. Write about how you are feeling and then read it to each other. You would be amazed. No one has ever killed anyone in their poems. No one has ever got rid of the other in their poems. No, none of them. While if you would talk with them, they could, they would fire them, kill them, whatever, dismiss them. They want in their poems. None of them does. Everyone wants to be heard, understood, loved, appreciated. And that's what comes across. And when you hear that,
So, so the so the poem, the
mm,
poetry
mm,
is not, it's really not an end in itself. It's not this thing we go out and create and then we put up on a, on a sign up on a wall and say, oh, no, it's a vehicle for human interaction, human community, human communication.
well, if you think about, historically, uh, poetry precedes literature. What we used to sing, at the beginning of our history as a species, we used to sing around the campfire poetic forms of storytelling.
Hmm.
So that's how we came together as a species. And we all know that by, more humans coming together as a community and finding a way through stories, through these poetic and lyrical stories that were sung out loud, that created community and made us stronger so that we could survive through centuries. And so I am actually a believer that what made us survive as a species, it is creativity, it is poetry, it is not strength, it's not fight, it's not weapon. So I actually would, hope that some of our leaders would be reminded of this, would remember that what made us survive and arrive up to 2025, it wasn't a stick or an arrow. It was the capacity of coming together around the campfire and sang poetry to one another. And that's not Fateme saying it. This biology telling us, anthropology telling us, science telling us. But anyway, we should say that people like to mention science, but then when science proves them wrong, they don't like science anymore.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I've noticed that. So, so tell us how you're applying your artistic impulse to the work that you do. What's the work? How do you define the work that you do?
This is a
That
kind
a
of a
fair, is it a
difficult
fair
question.
question? Is it a fair question to even ask you that?
And it's a fair question. I understand the curiosity, and sometimes I also ask myself, but how you do? But I need to frame this a little bit, if you allow me. So for me, art, poetry, painting, that are the art forms that I practice the more. They are practices. They are not tools, and so they help me, as I said, become present, expand my view, learn about human emotions, mindset, behaviors. And by doing that, I'm able to do the work that I do. And then if you are curious of like, how do I bring that into the work that I do? So first of all, it's not, me preaching to anyone. I will always ask people to practice with me because that's how we learn. It is, I mean, I don't believe in the fact that, okay, I tell you this and then you execute. Okay, that could be a training if I want to teach you how to use a tool, but I'm not teaching people how to write poems or how to paint. I am guiding them to experience themselves in the act of practicing poetry, in the act of practicing painting, regardless of their title. And then I will invite them to answer the questions. And now that you have discovered who you are or what you are made of, How do you apply that to the challenge you asked me to solve? So if I could simply say, okay, I act as a consultant in leadership development, in cultural transformation, in innovation, and I could use a lot of clever words. However, the bottom line of all of this, I will step there with all I am. So the scientist, the leader, the artist, and I will ask people to practice with me so that we can open up doorways. And when they see something, they cannot unsee it. And I will always call that, I will always evoke whatever they have seen to act in whatever challenge they are they are facing in that moment. I mean, I like to see, I mainly work in leadership development, and for me, leadership is a creative practice. It's not a title. It's not, an execution list of of things that needs to be done or orders that needs to be imparted. It is really a creative practice. And so if we don't practice,
You don't get anywhere.
no, no, that's is a firm belief of mine. And I also like to think that one can be a poet by mopping the floor. It's the quality of the presence while we mop the floor that can make that act poetry or not. So
I,
we can be a poetic leader by evoking that quality in our leadership decision.
it's exactly the way I have thought of leadership forever.
Mhm.
It's about taking personal initiative. You take initiative. You're gonna create some kind of change. You're gonna create something out of your actions. And it's not about developing followers,
No,
being
exactly. To me,
authentic.
it's not. To me, it's not. To me, it's really not about developing followers. To me, it's evoking leadership in everyone. What shifts if we move from, gaining followers or, engaging followers into evoking leadership in everyone? What happens? What changes? So
Well,
that will always be my invitation. That will always be my invitation to a leader, to a manager. Either we're doing, one-on-one work or teamwork, culture, innovation. That will always be my invitation.
and what I've seen in the best leaders is that they begin by um, moving towards other people,
Mm.
inviting them into a relationship with them.
It's a relation. It's relational. It's really relational. And everything, I mean, if you think about it, even when you think strictly about, corporate and how it is processes and system, even when you think about purpose, the purpose of a company, that's relational. It's not a statement as beautiful as it can be, but it's not a statement or it's not a goal to achieve. It's a relationship to create. It's a bridge people walk on together. Culture, the same. Culture is not, I cannot sit and design a culture. We have to look into people's mindset and behaviors. And mindset and behaviors. I mean, the foundation of mindset and behaviors are our stories, are what's going on in our mind, what's happening in our heart, our feelings, our emotion. If we don't barely touch that, or if we touch that from a very mechanical way. It's like, Rumi, I don't know if I ever told you that, but most probably I have because that's my favorite quote of all, of all, of all times. Rumi said something beautiful that I think it does apply today, even more so than when he wrote that. Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment.
Hmm.
That man had lived that. He had to sell his cleverness and by bewilderment. He left his own, established position as a preacher to follow a mystic. And guess what? Many people don't even know that Rumi was a preacher.
Right.
Everybody knows, even if you haven't read anything, that Rumi was a poet, was a mystic, because he saw this cleverness and bewilderment.
I like that a lot. I
I love it. I constantly repeat this, especially to myself. And
oh it it fits so well as an antidote to where we are today. I mean, I'm looking at the world as it's changing, and it's going through several stages of change, and it's hard to know where all that ends up. But if people stop trying to be clever, which is what they do, I mean, that's what leaders like to do. Look at me,
Mhm.
they're like peacocks. They're
we
pre
are all,
they're always
we are
pre.
all,
Yeah.
we are all somehow, how would I say, we are all stimulated to sound clever and more clever and more clever since we are kids. It's a performative society. So the best student, the best athlete, the best. So always, clinging to the prestige of our cleverness, to the prestige of our achievements. And where there is space for bewilderment. I can't remember who said this, and I think it goes along what we are just saying. We have traded mystery with mastery.
I've heard that too, and I agree
I
with it.
can't remember. I can't remember who said. I can't remember exactly the source, but I think the is the emblem of our society. We are all masters of something, and where is the space for mystery?
I see this as a product of the way we have viewed education, and
Absolutely.
that education is changing. I mean, in the U.S., there, the Trump administration is about to close the federal Department of Education,
Ah, I
and,
heard.
and send that back to the states and let the states take care of it at the local level. I think I think that's there's more accountability there for it.
It could go either way. It could go either way. It could be a blessing in disguise, or it could be the end of it.
Uh, but you see, I think this is what you're pointing towards. The reality is that when people get to the point of burnout, get to the point
Mhm,
of having to change, that they will find that creativity, that bewilderment
mhm,
as the way they will go. I already see that. I've seen that sort of response since the end of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic.
mhm,
I see a kind of openness that I have never seen in my lifetime, and people are don't know what to do with it.
mhm,
If they would just turn their phones off and just take a walk, go go talk to someone who is not like them. I mean, I have lots of people. I have lots of friends who do not have advanced degrees.
mhm,
And many of them do not have college degrees. And I love being with them because they are much more connected to the earth and to
mhm,
the sort of things that you and I are talking about, and they're not captured by their own clever thoughts. If we
mhm,
want to use Rumi's, and
mhm,
and when I'm with them, it's real.
mhm.
There's truth to it. And
There is truth to it. Yeah.
so and I think that's maybe what poetry allows us to discover
Mhm.
is how to be real and how to live a life that's true.
Yes. A life of truth. Yes. I like what you just said. Yeah.
Well, I hope that my elevation of a playlist, a YouTube playlist for poets, will attract that other poets will come and be in your role right now, which is to be a guest on the podcast, and that we can talk more about this, and maybe I don't, it's just maybe it something catches fire and it becomes something of a movement.
I hope that it will help us to become aware that there is a profound necessity of poetry. There is a profoundness in our hearts, not because everyone has to be a published poet, but because our hearts long for poetry, our hearts long for art. And I hope that that will enable all of us to practice more poetry alone, together, more art together.
Well, I hope so too.
Mhm.
Where can they find your poetry? Can they buy this on Amazon?
Yes, it's available on Amazon bookshops, Barnes and Noble, all the
Okay.
most known books retailers, and to be ordered also in the bookshops is available out there.
We'll pull out all that information in the show notes.
Okay,
And
thank you, Ed.
and I would encourage you all to take a piece of paper with you and a pen, and when you're sitting waiting on your daughter to come out of school, write 4 lines of something, 4 phrases, 4 words. Just put words down on the page and see how that is received the next day.
Yeah, or maybe first thing in the morning as waking up before we
Yeah.
get our hands to our phone. Maybe just, it's enough few words. We don't need to become, Rumi just at the first poem. There is a long way to become Rumi.
I usually wake up in the middle of the night and that's when I have to write stuff down.
Mm,
So,
mm, mm.
but you can do that too, all you who are watching.
I
And
hope somebody takes us serious on this.
yeah, we're being serious about this. You can change your life merely by trying to express something in a less, how shall we say, abstract, analytical way, in a more
Mhm.
creative way. You can do that.
Maybe can I give a prompt to people?
Please, please. Yes.
I will do. So I will read a poem, a very short poem, and then I'll give a prompt for people to start exploring a poetic or any
Okay.
artistic form that they
Love
desire.
this.
I read from the Poetry of Leadership, Born with Wings. I was born with wings to learn the difference between strength and softness. I learned strength. To fly, I have to learn softness. So my prompt for the people who are watching or listening is can you write a poem to that softness that you need to learn to be able to fly? What that is, what that feels like, what that looks like.
I love that. That's great.
I'm
Thank you
glad.
very much. Thank you very much. And this has been fun. This has been a lot of fun. And I wish you all well. And may you all discover that there's a poetic side to you that is worth expressing. And we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.